Speaking of the RRSP, can you talk to us a bit about transferring from an RRSP to an FHSA and then vice versa? Like, what do we need to know about the transfer process? And just tell us what we need to know here.
Yes, you can make transfers, direct transfers from certain types of registered accounts into the first home savings account and vice versa. If you were to transfer from your RRSP, it's not going to be tax deductible a second time because presumably you've already claimed that deduction through the RRSP. That would be double dipping if you did that. The other thing to note, if you do that, you're going to lose the RRSP room forever. So if you transfer out of your RRSP into your first home savings account, there's no way to regain the, for example, $8,000 that you transferred over. When might you want to do this? Is there any advantage to that? The scenario I can think of is if someone has a fairly healthy RRSP and they just can't come up with extra money for the first home savings account, and they know they're imminently, looking to purchase a home in the next few years, then maybe it might make sense to do that and try to transfer over. And then the benefit there is that when you've transferred from your RRSP over, you're not on the hook to pay it back. Whereas, and I think I'll talk about this a little later, the RRSP home buyers plan, you have to pay back. So there's very specific circumstances where you might want to do that. If you have a RIF, you cannot transfer from an RRIF into your first home savings account. So I think that sums up the two main registered accounts and what you're allowed to do with transfers.
That's amazing. Now, let's say you transfer from the RRSP to the FHSA, and then eventually you need to pull that out towards the purchase of a first home or building your first home. Whatever you pull out, though, even though it was transferred from the RRSP, I guess you're not paying any tax on that withdrawal if it's from the FHSA, right?
Correct. If it's going towards a qualifying home purchase or build, there's no taxation. Yeah. If you find yourself in the future simply not using the money and you're taking it out for personal income, you will be taxed at that point.
Okay. Before I forget, because, I didn't think about this question before, but so the money that you pull out from the FHSA, for it to be a tax-free withdrawal, it has to be used towards either the purchase of your first home, right, or building your home. What about other home-related expenditures? Like, I never thought about this before, but what about furniture for your house, things like that? Renovations after you buy a home. Like, are there set guidelines for this stuff that we know of yet?
Well, the CRA does use the word to either purchase a qualifying home or build it, or for furnishing. So it's interesting that you brought that up. So that would qualify.
Okay.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, if you're pulling out your $40,000, obviously that's probably going to go mostly towards a down payment. But as long as your down payment is greater than that amount, that would be an eligible and a qualifying withdrawal. I think something else to mention is, what if you find for some reason over time you end up not buying a house or not taking the money out to use it, and the 15-year window comes to an end? What can you do? Well, there's an amazing option that you can actually transfer the full sum of your first home savings account into your RRSP. So that's a way to not incur any taxation. You roll it into your RRSP. It's a tax deferred move, and you don't need RRSP contribution room. So that's really quite an amazing thing. Whether or not you have contribution room, it will not count towards it. So if you've got 50 grand in your FHSA, you can pop it into your RRSP and keep that going with 100% tax deferred growth.
Okay, so in a way, if you opened up the FHSA and you did not buy a home or build a home, then you have the option to supersize your RRSP, essentially. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, it's a great, it's a good RRSP boost. And, if you think about that a little more carefully, that could be quite a strategic use of the account. And I'll talk about that a little later when we get to investing and strategies.
Last thing about transfers is, what about moving money from a spouse's RRSP into an FHSA? So what do we need to know about that? Because I think there are some timeline issues here.
Right. So attribution rules would apply. So let's say you are contributing to your spouse's RRSP, their spousal RRSP, you have to let the 3 years go by before your spouse or partner could use the money out of their spousal RRSP to directly transfer into the first home savings account. Okay, so it's a bit tricky there, and that might seem like a long amount of time, but if you don't wait for those 3 calendar years to go by, it's a no-no, because they're saying, oh, wait a sec, the money is still spouse number 1. It hasn't turned into spouse number 2's money.
Got it. One thing I think we need to make sure everyone understands. So, Steph, let's say somebody is going to fund their FHSA using RRSP. They're going to transfer money. We should not be pulling money out from the RRSP into our personal hands and then taking that money and dropping it into the FHSA, right? Because otherwise that becomes taxable income, to my understanding. So what's the right way to be making these transfers?
Yeah, that's right. You want to do a direct transfer. So whatever institution you're housing these registered accounts in, they'll have a transfer request form. So you have to fill out the appropriate paperwork. And this is not uncommon that people will, oh, I'll take some money out of my RSP and transfer it over to here or something like that. You can do it, but please don't take the money out and bring it into your personal hands, like your personal checking account, because you're right. Then it's deemed an RRSP withdrawal, taxable income. You might be able to backpedal and have your institution help you out and correct that error. But ultimately, it has to be a direct transfer from, for example, your RRSP right into your first home savings account. The whole time that money is protected and shielded under that label of being in a registered account.